2011, NNSA moved to revise its nuclear export regulations to essentially to combine or to harmonize the 810 rules with our current 123 bilateral civilian nuclear trade agreements with other nations, and also to make several other tweaks to bring our regulations in line with today's nuclear export realities. It's been a long road. The rule has been through at least one supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking, but in fact the final rule was passed earlier this year, and as I understand it, it went into effect yesterday. With any regulation, the key is always a matter of maintaining the right balance, and in this case, the balance is the need for the government to be involved in understanding our nuclear exports and approving our nuclear exports as to minimize the risks of proliferation, while also minimizing the burden on U.S. industry that are seeking to export nuclear commercial technology through the rest of the world. Because obviously it's becoming increasingly clear that the importance of a strong U.S. nuclear export sector as a component of our international safety and non-proliferation policy. In effect, engagement is good, and so we have to balance the needs of engagement, the economic benefits of exports, with the need for to protect against proliferation. So we have two very special guests with us today. Rich Gorovich, who is the Director of the Office of International Regimes and Agreements for the NNSA that has jurisdiction over the implementation of 10 CFR Part 810, and Katie Strangis, who is a Senior Advisor in that office. So before I turn it over to Rich and Katie, I want to introduce Art Wharton, who is on the ANS Public Policy Committee and is chairing a joint ANS-NEI Nuclear Infrastructure Council group on developing guidance for this most latest revision of the 810 regulations. So Art, let me turn to you for a brief introduction, and then we'll go to our guests.
Yeah, thank you. The American Nuclear Society's Public Policy Committee is really happy to host this webinar to help engage the nuclear science and technology community in understanding the DOE regulation and its most recent changes. So last year, the Public Policy Committee built a team to develop industry guidance in the application of 10 CFR 810 to our community. At that same time, the Nuclear Energy Institute also had a task force in place to perform the same activity. So our two organizations joined forces toward that same goal. And in concert with NEI, I'm coordinating the activity for the Public Policy Committee. As that project stands today, the rough drafts are being finished this week, and now that the rule's been published last month. And we expect to see a final document coming together in June or July of this summer. And that should give participants a good understanding of interpretations to that rule as it applies in both the academic community and also in the commercial community as well. So I'll hand it back over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Art. I'm going to turn it over to Rich and Katie to say a few opening remarks, and then for those of you that are on the line that have any questions of Rich and Katie, please submit your questions by using the WebEx Q&A module that you should have up on your computer screen now. We're going to keep this pretty much close to 60 minutes. So you know, there is some time if you want to listen to some of the dialogue and put some questions in as a result of that dialogue. I'll also let Rich and Katie talk specifically about there may be some off-limits areas that they're prevented from talking about. I suspect they can't discuss specific inquiries about specific exports, but I'm going to turn it over to Rich, so that Rich, you can maybe just take it from here, talk a little bit about ground rules, and then provide a little bit of an overview. Rich. Do we have Rich?
Craig?
Yes.
Hi, this is Linda Zacko with the American Nuclear Society. We are, looks like maybe Katie might be with us now. Hang on one second. Katie? Rich?
Can anyone hear us? This is Katie in Rich Borovich's office.
Yeah, there they are. Great.
Hi, folks. So who do we have? Do we have both there on that line?
Yep, we're both here.
All right, great. Well, Rich, take it away.
Taking it away. Okay. Well, first, let me say thank you to Craig and to Art and to ANS for setting this up and inviting us to do this. You know, we were able to hear the beginning part of Craig's introduction, saying that this has been a long road that we've been on, but it's a road that DOE didn't go on alone. We took this road with a lot of help, and we don't view this as a regulation that is a DOE regulation as much as it's a regulation for the entire U.S. civil nuclear industry. Our hope is that others will see that the same way we do, and that it's in that spirit that we want to continue to move forward with actually implementing not just the regulation, but also implementing some of the other initiatives that we feel are vitally important to improving the relationship between us as the government regulators and the general public with regards to the rules. And I think most people are aware two of those initiatives are, one is developing finally a computerized licensing application system for us to go ahead and grant authorizations. We got a briefing on this on Monday, and I think we are closer to deploying something than we are to the beginning of it. We are looking for ways to expedite the security testing on our end, and we are to a point where we now are going through seeing what the system looks like, trying to address all the ideas and functionality that we've heard, both formally and informally. One important thing that I think that we've taken this is that Secretary Moniz has explicitly stated that this is a priority for him, and it's all hands on deck to get this thing, get this deployed, tested, make sure it's secure, and get it deployed. And I think a lot of people, I was very pleasantly surprised when I saw what the first phase looks like, and I think everyone's going to be very pleasantly surprised with it. And my hope is to make Department of Commerce and the NRC extremely jealous of the Department of Energy when they see this system deployed. But the system in and of itself is only part of the initiatives that we've laid out and we've identified moving forward. One of the things that we heard during the comment period was that we needed to have a better and more efficient process, and so we've engaged in a process improvement plan, again with the goal to be ISO 9001 compliant and hopefully certified. That process is also moving forward, again, also as a secretarial priority for us to move forward. And the idea is to have the E810 system and the process improvements trying to stage them so they roll out together so that they're in sync. But I know that while that's important, the real reason for the call today is to talk about the rule itself. And I think by now a lot of you have had a chance to read, digest, and then what the new rule looks like. Katie and I are more than happy to take the remaining, the most of the hour that we can use to try and answer any questions that we have. I think that hopefully you agree with the sentiment that we tried to find the right balance between finding ways for and creative ways to regulate the industry that provided flexibility, not just in process, but also flexibility in interpretation that is forward-looking, not backwards-looking with regards to the industry, but at the same time does what the law intends us to do, which is to ensure that our national security and non-proliferation interests remain a priority over these critical technologies. And the last thing I'd like to do with my little bit of time here is to introduce Katie and let her say a few words to everybody. I think as everyone seeing more and more, Katie is a partner in crime in this endeavor, and someone that I know that everyone's becoming more and more pleased to have to work with, rather than having to talk to me all the time. I know that most of you would rather talk to Katie. Frankly, I can't blame you. I think that's the way most people feel. But let me introduce Katie Stranges, who last year joined us from the Department of Energy's NNSA General Counsel's office to come on and join us over here on the good side of the fence, over in the policy side, to really help us and take charge of the 810 process. And without her leadership, I don't know that we would be as far along as we've come on this whole thing. So, Katie?
Hi, everyone. I must have done something for Rich to say all those nice things, because that never, ever happens. And as part of our process improvement, a rule that I have instituted is Rich has no more secret Part 810 meetings with anyone. So everything is open and transparent, and we all know what's going on at all times. We were so excited to have the rule finally published, and we've actually been crazy with the outreach we're trying to do and our regional outreach meetings we're doing. I would encourage everyone to keep checking regularly at our website for updates on events and speaking events, and our first event in Charlotte will be in April. We'll be going to Pittsburgh and Seattle, and hopefully we'll get to see a lot of you in person because we want to make this transition to the new rule as seamless and transparent as possible. So with that, I think we'll take questions.
Great. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Katie. What I'm going to do first is, as the questions are starting to come in here, I'm going to move to Art and allow him some panelist prerogative to ask a few questions to start, and then I will be back momentarily with some questions from the audience. So, Art, fire away.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and start out easy, and I'll ask if you can give a summary of what you think the primary changes are that occurred in the 810 rulemaking.
The primary summary of the changes that have taken place. Well, I think for the most part, what you'll find in the way that we would hope people would read the new rule is that the rule tries to accomplish two main goals. One, it tried to add clarification instead of relying on interpretation, we tried to provide both technical and clarification, as well as what I would call more legal clarification as to the requirements of the rule, as well as in the scope of the rule moving forward. And so you'll see that in the new rule versus the old rule, there's explicit listings of technologies that try and lay out the scope of the control. Technologies for where examples of technologies for where there are exceptions to the rule, or where we can take advantage of fast-track reviews and authorizations. And so we've tried to, we've heard the call that that the rule was regulating a very technical industry, but the rule itself was very short on technical description, so we tried to do that. The second goal that we tried to do was to change the tone of the rule so that it matched the President's Export Control Reform Initiative, which was the idea that regulations should be positive looking and not negative looking. And specifically, you're going to see that in the list of countries that are generally authorized. In the past, we didn't say have a rule that was permissive in nature. We had a rule that was restrictive in nature. And so the overall tone of the rule is to come across as permissive. These are the things that you are allowed to do under the rule, under the certain reporting and application requirements. And so the idea was to come across as permissive. Now, some people may say, well, that's just tone and words, but it's more than that in our minds. What we were hearing was for the industry to grow, for civil nuclear cooperation to be part of a broader national security policy and a national security strategy. You want people to feel that approaching the government about ideas for exports, for nuclear cooperation, for technical assistance in areas is one that the government is going to look at positively. And that starts with the rules that we have to apply, and when you draft the rules in a positive sense, the sense that we want everyone to understand is we want to be approached. We don't want people to fear approaching us, because the reality is most of the time we want to be able to work with applicants to try and make the ideas for cooperation that people have move forward. So I think that's probably the two major themes, if I would summarize them, regarding the rule and changes to the rule and approach. There are a lot of very interesting specifics within the rule, but in terms of summarizing it, that's the way I would phrase it.
Okay, I'll ask a follow-up on one that's pretty widely applicable to the nuclear science and technology community. The understanding of reporting requirements for generally authorized activities has been clarified in this rule change. Can you characterize what your expectations are in the NNSA on those reports?
Specifically, Art, are you talking about the elements in 8.10.11 and 8.10.12?
Yes.
So, well, in the reporting requirements, I think what we're looking for is for the idea for reporting under the general authorization element or under anything that's approved under a fast track, the idea is that in us going ahead and saying that an activity is essentially pre-approved or shall we say more regulatory sense, that the Secretary has already made his non-inamicality finding, and therefore it's within the scope of the control, is the reporting is really there to make sure that the applicant, because they still are an applicant under the general the general authorizations, or I should say the public at large, in using the general authorization authorities, understand that it is not just a blank check. There are still limitations in the rules. So you can engage, and the idea is through the reporting, that the reporting provides us and the user of the general authorization with enough clarity and assurity over the cooperation that people understand what the rules of the road are. We do not require a need, for example, if somebody's providing a report under general authorization, to see all the data that's created, if it was, say, a joint project where they were creating data. We don't need to see the data. What we need to know is reporting that provides just enough detail for us to be able to say, yes, this activity is generally authorized, it remains generally authorized, and we understand the direction it's going on, and we understand that the applicant understands where this cooperation is heading. Typically, you know, these reports can be as little as a page, page and a half in letter format. Sometimes applicants want to provide more information, and that's up to them in doing it. But for us, it's really just to make sure that everyone understands what the regulations state and that the cooperation that has taken place was within the bounds of the regulation, and if future cooperation is going to continue, that there's everyone understands the rules going forward.
Okay, I'm going to take an audience question, combine it with one of my questions here. The basic question was, do you have an example of when fundamental research crosses into applied technology, as that would become controlled under 10 CFR 810? And to relate this to a question here, we have a question from somebody who's working on the ITER project for, it's an international fusion project where they need to use radiation transport codes. Yes?
Okay.
I think we may have lost Art, but I do want to, let me just pick up where he left off, and that is, we've had a couple of questions about, for instance, probabilistic risk assessments, PRAs, for other countries. We have some people working in Japan, but that could also be one of the early stage activities in specifically authorized countries. And the other question we've had is the radiation transport codes that may be used in ITER, which is an international partnership, as you know, fusion reactor, that includes certain partners that are specifically authorized. So, Rich, you want to take a crack at those?
Sure. Well, let me take the second one first on ITER. ITER is actually very easy for me to answer. And that is that here in the Department of Energy, the Office of Science, which is responsible for the U.S. government's contributions to ITER, has its own export guidance that it provides to its contractors and to those that are supporting ITER. And the reason they have their own guidance is because the technology, the regulatory scope for ITER crosses definitely 2, maybe sometimes 3 different agencies. And so Office of Science, and they started ITER, worked very hard with Commerce, with NRC, with us, to make sure that they had comprehensive guidance that they provided to their contractors and to those that were providing the U.S. support into ITER. So if there is a question about the radiation transport codes and what can be provided to ITER or not, you have to go back to the DOE's Office of Science and talk to them. And part of the reason we do that is because some of the codes, we've split jurisdiction between the agencies depending upon who created the code, whether it was a DOE code or a commercial code, and specifically what the code does and what its original intent was for. So for everything ITER related, we generally point them back to the Office of Science because it's not. They have the direct links back to the other agencies and with us, and so that way they can coordinate everything. With regards to the first question on fundamental research and when does it cross into applied, there's essentially two things that we look at when that takes place. The first is the information and the publicly available. The rule has a definition of what is publicly available information, and information that is in publicly available or in the public domain is essentially exempt from the rule. We don't control that because it's already in the public domain. And a lot of times it's fundamental research, there's the intent to publish. And so if there is an intent to publish freely, openly, that falls within the scope of the rule, then obviously it's not applied technology, or it's in the public domain and move forward. But there are times that basic research does cross the line into applied research. And a good example, I think, of that is sometimes looking at things well, an example I can come up with is some research that was being done at the national labs with regards to different alloys and how they act in high radiation environments. It was just basic research being done on alloys, but they soon determined that those alloys might be good in the fast reactor context. Well, the initial research on the alloys themselves was considered to be fundamental research and essentially was released in the public domain. But as soon as they turned and they said, well, now this is how you use the alloy in the building of a fast reactor, and here's what you do to, if you need to modify the alloy in some way to make it more or less usable in a reactor. At that point, it becomes applied, and at that point, it's potential that that it could come under if it was to be shared internationally, come under the scope of the 810 regulation. So
okay.
that, off the top of my head, that would probably be an example, but if we thought about it a little bit more, I think I could probably come up with a few better ones on where that's happened in the past as well.
Great. Thanks, Rich. And I'm just going to, a quick note out to the audience, just on your Q&A, you will notice that you have a 256-character limit to your questions. So I've gotten a few half questions that I'm trying to interpret here, but let's go to the next question, and this is a full question. Did the NNSA consider providing more general authorization for export of technology concerning fabrication of fuel containing plutonium to countries that already have established plutonium processing facilities, such as the UK, France, or Japan?
Did we consider it? We looked at it, yeah. I mean, we certainly looked at it. The problem that we run into is another element of the Atomic Energy Act, or other elements of the Atomic Energy Act that are specifically developed for plutonium, and looking at that. And there's, to be honest with you, I mean, I think there's while we looked at it and we understood that there were others that had capabilities out there and that we were controlling things with those capabilities, we still felt that the U.S. And a lot of what we've done within the Department of Energy with regards to plutonium fabricated fuel, we are in some ways the world's leaders on it, and that in many ways, getting a check and ensuring with the State Department, getting their concurrence, checking with the other agencies, and making sure that the Secretary was on board with those transfers remained important. Remained important from the Secretary's inimical finding, which is not just limited to a national security determination. It is that it is in the common interest of the United States. That's a very broad determination. And the department felt, I think, well, I know the department felt that that the amount of applications that we saw was not for this technology, did not warrant a major change in approach or relaxation, given the limited number that we've seen, and given the fact that typically the department is the exporter of this technology, given our leadership in it.
Okay.
So we did consider it, but the decision was made to keep it as is.
Great. Let me take it in a slightly different direction, Rich. So you know, a big part of, and I may be using the term too broadly, but a little bit of the controversy surrounding the rule was the change in the country list, and that countries that were previously generally authorized are now specifically authorized, and that we were that there was business being done in some of these countries that now would have to be reported. The new rule includes a provision that sets a deadline by which companies report their existing activities, and then it gives you and your team a chance to review those specific authorization applications, but that it doesn't create an interruption in the activity. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Talk about how you're, I mean, do you expect an influx of applications? Are you prepared for them? How are you going to handle it? Yeah, well, I think a couple things that sort of, it's not just one solution is going to, or one thing that we're going to do is going to address the broader concern. What we heard through the rule was not so much that the act of applying for a specific authorization was so much of a problem, as much as it was how quickly the authorization could be provided back, how efficiently could we work. And part of that has to do with the way that the law is set up and requires the consultation process. Part of that is the fact that to complete the internal consultation process, we have to talk with another government. Part of that is also our own internal efficiencies, and part of that also has to do with caseload and resources that we have available versus the caseload that we have. And what we've tried to do in the rule, knowing that there would be this concern, is to address all aspects of that. So, for example, with the flipping of the list, or the creation of the new list to a positive list and linking it to 123s, I can tell you right now that by doing that, I had on my desk for a country that flips from the specific authorization to the general authorization, a request for 150 names to be cleared to go do work in that. That could be treated as 150 cases. That all became generally authorized. In many ways, the workload that we've had in terms of cases, we believe after the initial influx of the savings clause will essentially decrease according to the numbers that we have. But that's not enough just to have the workload decrease. That's why we're going through the process improvement, and that's why, working with the State Department and Department of Commerce, we're working with governments to get the assurance process to work faster, especially in the countries and with the partners that we know have been moved. Got to remember, a lot of countries that were flipped, there is absolutely no record that we have that nuclear commerce was done with those countries. Now, that may not be the case, that there was actually nuclear commerce being done, but it wasn't being reported. And if it's not being reported, we can't really be able to account for that. And so the reporting is vital, as you pointed out, Craig. The reporting is under this 180 days is vitally important to us. And we don't think that we're going to change the rule once every 20-some years. If we see in the 180-day, in the savings clause period, that there is a set of data that was not being reported to us that causes us to rethink this is something that we will take up with the management and with the interagency and with the White House about that. We don't expect that to be the case, but you know, for most of the countries that flipped, we can see that. And the other thing that the rule has is flexibility with regards to the country list, which we did not have in the old rule. So there may be a way, without having to go through a whole regulatory change, that we can look and say, gosh, we didn't know that this country, that there was 3,000, you know, generally authorized activities going on with this country. We didn't. None of it had been reported up until now.
Now it's specific authorizations. Maybe we can get the Secretary, and maybe we should get the Secretary to make a non-intimicality finding, which would then allow us then to add it to the generally authorized list. So again, the key is flexibility. The key is to be positive looking, and the key is to make decisions based on real data, and that's what we need.
Great. Thank you, Rich. I'm going to turn it back over to Art, who's got a question locked and loaded. Art?
Yes, can you hear me now? All right, Rich and Katie, talk to us about authorizations related to the safety of operating plants. What are the biggest implications to U.S. persons and businesses and their ability to assist foreign countries in the area of nuclear safety?
Okay, that's a good question, Art, and I just want it to be known. I am trying to ask Katie to answer questions, but she's being shy. Okay, under the current rule, as folks, or under the old rules, folks will have noted, there was essentially a general authorization or a fast track authorization for nuclear safety. It was very seldomly used. And part of the problem was when the department put out the rule, it did not define what was the scope of operational safety. And many of the examples that we saw that came in it was hard to determine whether it was operational safety or safe operations of a reactor or of a nuclear plant. And so it became very hard for us to do this. So one of the things that we wanted to do when we looked at the rule was to try and define that. And you'll see in the rule we've gone through and tried to lay out, and I think there's a very hefty part of the preamble that goes into the discussion about the back and forth that we've had about whether we could define something as being operational safety. Unfortunately, while we were going through the rule, there was the nuclear accidents in Japan at Fukushima. It is unfortunate the tragedy that it happened, but what it also did was it also started to focus us as a department, as a government, and as international nuclear partners on the definition of operational safety, and provided now very real examples that we could look at and use in terms of determining technical scope. It also forced us to look at the idea of operational safety in a slightly different way. So what we ended up doing in the rule was sort of a couple things on operational safety. One, we added in tried to provide a technical description of what is operational safety versus what is safe operations. Number two, we kept the imminent radiological hazard language as is. And that specifically says, well, and we did use it under Fukushima, if there is a imminent radiological hazard, don't worry about the paperwork, go off, do what you need to do to correct the hazard as best you can, we'll worry about the paperwork later. That remained in place to give me and Katie essentially the authority to approve somebody in an emergency basis, so we didn't have to go to the Secretary, and to do it without too much paperwork and without too much fuss here, because time is of the essence. The third thing that we did is that in the definition of operational safety, what we said was, if you think that potential cooperation is for operational safety, falls within the discussion that we provided in the rule of what is operational safety, write us, let us know. If we agree with you, within 45 days we will let you know. And if it's if we agree with you, it would essentially be generally authorized, and you'd have to go through just have to file the reporting requirements. We think that is something new. The flexibility is something that we're very happy with, and that we think that it will provide everyone that could be a potential applicant who wants to work in the very important area of operational safety with the regulatory flexibility to do their work timely and efficiently.
So, Rich, I've got another one for you, and this is a variation on a theme. I think we have a fair number of participants from the academic community, and I'm going to try to push some of these questions together. But we want to talk about how you look at the role of papers, technical papers. So the first question goes, in dealing with new reactor licensing and new fuel designs, the NRC has repeatedly stated that if papers are published and reviewed by ANS and other societies, that will lend credibility to the new design. Will the new Part 10 impact papers? Somebody else writes, many of these papers are highly technical and could be considered as having export control technology. This also encompasses DOE and NRC technical papers. How are you handling that? Do you have your own little peer review board that you've created within NNSA, or how are you going to deal with the issue? And I guess that gets back to the public information exception as well. How will you approach that part of it?
Well, let me say that I mean we're aware of what the NRC has stated about technical papers and public papers, and we, as a department, obviously support that. It's important to do that. But frankly, it hasn't really been a problem yet under the old rule. We don't believe that the new rule really impacts those understandings that we've had, which is, as you pointed out, I think it's you, Craig, right? Not Art now.
Yeah.
The public domain aspect of this. Yes, public domain information can be very technical, but once it's put into the public domain, the department doesn't have the ability to essentially require controls on it. There is a flip side to that, though, which is that if the information is placed into the public domain with the intention to avoid export controls, all the agencies, whether it's NRC, whether it's us, whether it's Commerce, whether it's state, have a dim view on that. But if the intention always was to publish, and it is published and it is placed in the public domain, and as long as it's not sensitive nuclear technology, and as long as it's not restricted data, it's in the public domain, and therefore we think that the current the interpretation under the old rule is will carry over into the new rule. But we're also more than happy to answer the specific question you raised. If you're unsure and you want to send the abstract in, send it in. We have access to the entire national lab system to review it and help us and you come to the right conclusion. And we're happy to do that.
Good, good. So shifting directions a bit, we've got a question here about Mexico. What are the steps for exporting nuclear reactor technology, specifically SMR technology, to Mexico? They do have the Laguna Verde reactor, but from what I can tell, they do not have a 123 agreement with the U.S.
So, that's right. We do not have a 123 agreement with Mexico. We have what's called an IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, project and supply agreement that is essentially a trilateral, legally binding agreement that meets all the requirements of Section 123 of the Atomic Energy Act with Mexico and the IAEA. And it's through that we did allow U.S. exporters to supply the nuclear reactor to Mexico at Laguna Verde, the two reactors, as well as the fuel that goes there. The project and supply agreement remains in place, and as long as cooperation is taking place pursuant to the project, to the scope of the project and supply agreement, you know, everything can flow to Mexico, whether it's nuclear material, and under the new rule, the Secretary has determined that because there is a project and supply agreement, that he can make the non-inimitality finding, and so therefore those elements are generally authorized. If it's a technical scope outside the agreement, and I'll be very, very blunt about this, that will require, if somebody wants to go beyond the scope of that, it's something that we would want to make sure that the Mexican government is fully on board with before there was an expansion of nuclear cooperation in terms of technical scope. And not that there's a problem, but that we have it from time to time, not specifically with Mexico, but we've seen where companies want to export new areas of nuclear technology to a partner country, only for us to find out that the government of that country did not sanction the direction that was moving in. And sometimes that's created some difficulties for the governments and for the companies. And so in the area of SMRs, if Mexico were interested, it's not generally authorized right now, would require specific authorization. But our view would be, the reason we want to do that is we want to make sure that the Mexican government in Mexico City is fully on board with the pursuit of down that technical pathway. And if we felt that in working with the State Department, if we felt that the amount of cooperation required a regulatory change, again, we now have the flexibility to change the generally authorized list when the Secretary makes his non-inimitality finding, and we would work with the State Department to present that case to the Secretary for expanding the general authorization if all the parties involved were on board. But keep in mind, just because there's a request for it, we also need to make sure that the government has duly authorized those recipients to receive and to work on those technologies. And that's part of the challenge that we in the State Department have in performing our duties.
Okay, great. All right, so the next question I have is, let's see here, participating in a review of PRA for a foreign country that is using either an ANS or an ASME standard. The standard isn't in the public domain, but the hosting organization in the foreign country has purchased a standard to use in the review. And I'm going to add my editorial comment here. You know, assuming all of the other conditions are met in terms of the technical nature of the paper, does that affect a decision as to whether or not this is approved or you know, required?
Let me see if I understand it. Can you repeat the question, Craig?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of read it word for word. Participating in a review of PRA for a foreign country using an ANS or an ASME standard. The standard is not in the public domain, but the hosting organization in the foreign country purchased the standard to use in the review. Is this review affected by 810? So I think the issue is that you are doing a review, you're using a standard that technically isn't in the public domain since it's a subscription service, but it's developed by a U.S. Consensus Standards organization. Assuming everything else is in the public domain but for the ANS and ASME standard, is that then exempted?
Boy, is that a specific question. You know, one of the last things that we did in issuing the rule was comments came in associated with PRA work and probable risk assessment technology, and we were very intrigued by the comments that came in because our sense was, at least in the past, we had treated all of this as being under the scope of the regulation. but again, given that how much time had passed since we had made that interpretation, where the state of the industry was, and those things, we felt that there was merit in taking another look at the whole PRA issue. And I'm trying to find where it is in the new rule that we have it, and I can't find it and talk at the same time. But I'll tell you what my sense of it is in how to deal with it. What the argument was put forward to us, and the argument that we accepted, was that PRAs, for the most part, use international standards, and those standards are published. They may not be available free of charge, and as you said, may require a subscription to ASME or some other element. But they are essentially known to everybody, or at least accessible to everyone. But if you use those public standards to perform the PRA for them, then you really weren't providing any direct or indirect assistance for the production of special nuclear material. You were essentially using someone else's standard and someone else's data and just performing the analysis to turn over to them. And so that was essentially the way we looked at it, was the teaching of how to do a PRA, not so much, hey, I'm walking in with my own PRA standard, I'm generating our own data and then turning that over to somebody else. And we tried to draw that line in the rule between the divisions of if you're using someone else's standard and you're using someone else's data and you're helping them perform the PRA, we view that as teaching them how to do PRAs, not performing the PRA itself. The difference being, though, if you were just asked to come in and perform the PRA, depending upon what information is provided, you may or may not be within the, require specific authorization depending upon the other elements of the facts of the case. That might be a little garbled, but hopefully I've made it clear that we did take another look at the PRA issue, and we wanted to make it clear that the teaching of how to do PRAs, or the assistance of performing someone to do a PRA, would be construed as the teaching of how to do PRAs, and that was not something that we felt required specific authorizations moving forward.
Great, thanks, Rich. I'm going to turn it over. Art has another question. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah, and this is probably the last question we have time for. It actually originally came from the audience here. We have a lot of internationally operating nuclear service and technology companies, and it's recognized that foreign entities are regulated by U.S. export regulations insofar as that they are using U.S. origin nuclear technology. What is your view on how international organizations should be treating U.S. origin nuclear technology as they go about doing their business, or even determining whether their technology is U.S. origin or sufficiently localized?
Yeah. Art, can you give me an example of what you mean by an international organization?
We have, the question actually came from a service company based out of the Netherlands, and they perform work internationally.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'll try, let me try and answer this. So 10 CFR 810 applies to U.S. persons, does not apply to foreign persons. But if there is a foreign person that has U.S. technology, they acquired that technology, probably, if it's from the public domain, then the rule would not apply because it's information. But if they acquired it from a U.S. person, the obligation to the rule, the legal obligation, is on the U.S. person that provided the information. And that person or that company or that group of individuals that provided that information should have put some level of constraint on that government when they, or on their partner when they ship the information to us. Now, whether it was generally authorized, yeah, that happens. It's done. It's since generally authorized, but there should be, like there is general when you use a general authorization under commerce or under NRC rules, it's also done with the understanding of, well, that third part or that second party should not be transferring it to a third party that the government of the United States has already identified shouldn't receive it. For us, it can go on to other generally authorized countries. If it requires a specific authorization, then the foreign partner should be working with the U.S. partner to come back and make sure that that this is dealt with. You know, that all the paperwork and the regulatory standard has been. If there's a violation, we have no legal recourse against the foreign company. The legal recourse and will be a U.S. person. But having said that, we do recognize that it is very difficult to go after that, and a lot of times the recourse that we'll take is working with the foreign governments to make sure that they understand the limitations on what has been provided. And that's something that we've done here with the new rule, which is we have gone out to our partner countries, those that are, you know, on the generally authorized 123 partners, our nuclear suppliers group partners, and explain to them, you know, how the new rule is going to work. It's something that governments do all the time as they make regulatory changes that impact others. So a bit convoluted, but hopefully you get the point.
That's great, Rich. Thank you. Well, we've reached the appointed hour where we do have to wrap up and sign off. But I want to take again the opportunity to thank you, Richard and Katie, for participating today, for all the work you're doing. We certainly look forward to continued dialogue and discussion about how things are going and issues that pop up. And obviously, ANS will be working closely with others in the nuclear community to help continue to clarify some of these issues. I want to thank Art for his participation in this, and thank you all the participants for joining. We appreciate it. The webinar will be available. The recording of the webinar will be available on the ANS website, so keep a lookout for that. And then for anybody else who's interested in more information, you can go to nnsa.energy.gov, and the easiest way is to search Part 810, and that will get you to a page with lots of information and the ability to reach out to Rich and his staff in the staff in Rich's office. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.